Hi there, my name is Dylan Hornsby and welcome to Getting Practical with Video. This week we're going to dive into where the magic happens and have a look at some editing basics. Trust me, editing can be a daunting experience, especially if you haven't done it before. But my best advice for you is just to have some fun with it. And if you make a mistake, well, the undo button will be your friend. Now, to answer what is probably the first question that comes to your mind, no, there isn't just one editing suite that you absolutely need to use. If you are already comfortable with an editing suite, then feel free to stick with that. But if you're new to editing, then you might want to try out some free software. For Mac users, iMovie is probably the most obvious option, but for Windows users, you might want to try VSDC, Lightworks, or maybe even HitFilm. Be wary of some online editing sites, as in many cases, they'll ask for a small fee when you go to export, or they'll put a watermark over the top, which in many cases makes your footage, your work, your video unusable. Feel free to try out a couple of different editing suites to find the one that you're most comfortable with. Once you do settle on one, get familiar with it. Make a short video, try out some editing basics, and export your video out to make sure you know how it all works. What's really important here is not what you use, but how you use it. Now, before we even open our editor, file management is an important aspect to keep an organized project. I like to create a few folders to help keep everything in order and easy to find. This can save you a lot of time, especially if you come back to a project later. And it also makes sure that your editing program doesn't lose track of files in the event that you move them around after you start. And of course, be sure to back up everything. And I cannot stress this enough, but save regularly. If your computer has an auto save feature, be sure to set it to 5 minutes or less. So without going into too much detail, I'm going to take you on a very quick tour through my editing suite. There are three main components in every editing program. The first one is called the bin, and the bin is where your raw, unedited files will be found, and it's usually found on the left-hand side of most editors. This raw footage will then go into your timeline, and this is where the editing starts to happen. Then up the top here is what is usually called the viewer, or it could even be called a canvas. But this is the monitor that shows you what's actually happening in your timeline here. And as you can see, as I scroll across, the corresponding shots come up on the viewer there. And once you get your head around these three components, it makes editing a lot easier and a lot less scary. Let's wrap up today's episode by having a quick look at cuts and transitions. You may have heard the saying, cut on action. And this helps to disguise the edit as the movement diverts your viewer's attention and makes for a smooth transition between shots. Where shots don't link together, you may want to consider using a transition, such as a crossfade, or as it's sometimes called, a cross dissolve. This can ease the jump between shots. Crossfades can also be used to suggest the passing of time. Jump cuts can be effective if you only have one shot, but I strongly recommend that you keep this to a minimum. They're usually included in videos to add in extra energy to the edit, or you might see them being used in music videos to be cut to the beat. However, there are more creative and more interesting ways of avoiding jump cuts, and we'll have a look at that next week. This week we looked at some editing basics and transitions, and now it's your turn to give it a go. If you have any of your own tips, be sure to leave them in the comment section as well. Next week, we're going to be looking at some more editing tips and overlays. Be sure to follow me on Twitter and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more updates. And until next week, I've been your host, Dylan Hornsby, and I'll see you online.